Good morning, Bethany. Thank you so much
Uh,
for joining me today.
yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this one today.
Me too, me too. So why don't you just go right ahead and introduce yourself to these wonderful mothers that are listening today?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name's Bethany Gettis, and I actually used to work as a nurse back in the day before I had kids in the diet industry. And I saw that in the diet industry, it was really flawed. It became like a revolving door. It was actually really sad. Like after the first year kind of being there, I noticed that the people were coming back in a lot heavier. And I was like, there's something wrong with this system. It's pretty broken. I ended up opening up my own business after I had my boys. So I have right now, they're 6 and 7 years old, very rambunctious. And yeah, so I've been running my business basically since my first was a little baby. So I've had it for about over 6 years. And I've been in the healthcare and, food industry for probably over like a good 10 years. And like I said, I run everything from home, and I'm also a widow as well. And I've done the single parenting aspect. So I've got a lot of stuff behind me here that I can help a lot of moms with.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about your business and what you do in a little bit. But so before we start, I like to ask all of my guests this one question. And that is, what does confidence mean to you? And has it changed, or how has it changed since becoming a mom?
What is confidence to me? Confidence to me is more, I think, more of a knowing. So I think it's something where I know that I'm going to make something happen for myself. Like no matter what, even if whatever's going on in my life, I know I'm going to get there. That's to me where I feel confident. With being a mom, it has definitely thrown me through a bit of a roller coaster. I think with my first, I wasn't very confident, I would say, because I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. I did actually suffer pretty bad with postpartum depression and anxiety with my first baby. But then, actually, as I had my second, I actually started to realize I knew what I was doing. So, again, it came down to like a knowing for me, and it changed everything. So, that's kind of where I see confidence for myself.
Yeah, I always love hearing people's individual perspectives on it because it's always so different. So
Yeah.
that's a good answer. So let's get back to you and your business, and I would love for you to just touch a little bit more on exactly what you do and how you help moms specifically.
Definitely. So I help women mainly, and I find it happens to be around emotions more than anything. So, I am a nutritional consultant. That is sort of my title. I was a nurse before, so I have a lot of background in that area. But what I've noticed is I've started to get into more coaching with women. I actually do a lot of like membership stuff as well. So they go into a membership and they learn a lot with my videos about nutrition, meal plans, and kind of the how-tos. But at the end of the day, I've noticed a lot more people are needing a lot more accountability, and they come to me for help around emotional eating. And there's just so many things that kind of tie into why people are emotionally eating. Like I said, I can go into this for a long period of time because emotions are a tricky one because it goes into our past, our belief system, what we value in life. Like there's a whole thing around it, right?
And that's a perfect segue for what we're talking about today. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic because, like I said prior to recording, this is something that most of my clients suffer with, and that is emotional eating. So can you and I know I run into this a lot as a coach, a lot of women actually don't realize that what they're doing is emotional eating. Could you kind of explain what exactly emotional eating is?
Yeah, if this is kind of the why people are doing it, there's actually a several different ways. So this is where I think people sometimes don't realize they're doing it because it's an autopilot thing sometimes. So emotional eating, when you talk about sort of an emotional eating binge cycle, it fuels each other basically. So emotional eating is what is fueling binge cycles. The two go hand in hand basically because the emotions that what are driving you to get to an episode, it starts to make you go into like the sweets, the carbs, the unhealthy fats, like in one sitting, and you're eating a lot and you're kind of not really realizing what you're doing. It's sort of an autopilot thing, but it's like if you start to tune in with your body, maybe in a physical aspect and an emotional more so, you start to realize like there's like these habits that you're continually doing. So emotional eating, yes, it can create a whole host of cycles of binge eating, I've noticed.
And now, just to be clear, we are talking about, people who have made this a habit, right? It's everyone emotional eats from time to time, but it's when it becomes a habit or something that's consistent that it becomes an issue, correct?
Yeah, it's like I said, a lot of it is kind of where are you mentally, and there's different reasons why, and I can totally get into that with you as well.
Please go for it.
Well, what I've noticed over the years, so basically I've noticed about 4 different things that keep cropping up for people, why they're doing it. Because a lot of people are like, I know I'm doing it, but I don't know why. And I think a lot of people want to understand themselves. The first one I found, and this was in the diet industry, was it's an all or nothing mentality. So I noticed when I was working in the diet industry, the clientele that I was dealing with mainly were very perfectionist people. I'm like that myself, but everybody does it in different ways, whether it's like in their personal life, business life, things like that. But I've noticed the people that tend to diet more are people that are like, okay, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to start Monday and I'm going to be like 100% good. And then Friday rolls around and everything's gone out the window. So it's a place where people feel very rigid. They restrict themselves a lot. And that's why dieting works for them, because it's like, okay, you're telling me what I need to do. I'm going to stick to 100%. But people don't realize that that issue is that you're basically creating yourself up for a cycle. So we are human at the end of the day. And when you start getting yourself into these like mindsets of like, I can't be, I've got to be perfect. I've got to like do this exactly how they said, life situations come up, or you have like an emotional day and you're not giving yourself that like leeway, that gray area. And it's like, well, I failed. And then when you say you failed, you go to the opposite end of the extreme, right? And that's where they eat a whole ton of food and it causes cycles. So it's like, I'm being perfect and then I'm not being perfect. And I've noticed that one thing really derailed a lot of people coming back into, like I said, the clinics a lot heavier than when they started a year later. And I was like, there's a problem with this setup here. So that's number one. Number 2 is a lot of people need the accountability to the mindset. It's not the accountability too much to the physical aspect of the eating. Most people know what they should be doing, but a lot of people are struggling with like their mindset. They've had a bad day, and instead of sort of like talking about it, it's like they're stuffing their feelings away. Or like, childhood stuff comes up. And this is a big one as well, where it's a belief system and you kind of get stuck in these like cycles of like, well, I'm not good enough. And so therefore I'm going to sort of punish myself with food. And some people do it like not knowing that they're doing it. And it's almost sometimes a form of safety. I've noticed a little bit with people who have had pretty traumatic pasts. Weight sometimes is actually a barrier for people to help them shelter away from, maybe a relationship, maybe away from people like getting too close to them. So that's another aspect. And it's sometimes that's, excuse me, that's on like an unconscious level that people do that. The third thing I've noticed is self-worth and really strong emotions are coming up. This is where things like blame and guilt come into play, sadness and anger. Having experienced grief myself, I've experienced these emotions all on a big level myself. Loss of a job, loss of a relationship, loss of, a spouse, child, anything like that. It's big, heavy emotions, and a lot of people don't know how to deal with it. Now, moms, I find women a little bit more are on this spectrum than men with the emotional eating. It does happen with men, but not as much. Is that women don't have the ability to go out and party and things like that when they've got kids at home. So they're not exactly going to go off the rails and do other things. They're typically going to do things at home because that's sort of where they are, right? So food is like a quick go-to for a lot of moms. Wine is another one, drinking at home, and then eating as well. So that's kind of why women, it's more that area, more so than anything. And then the fourth thing I've noticed is the feeling of trying to comfort uncomfortable emotions. So when something comes up and you don't want to deal with it and you're, say, like missing someone, you need some comfort and you're not feeling like you're getting that in aspects of your life, you use food as a comfort tool. And we kind of learn this as like children too. Like, think about, when you've had like an ice cream or something like that as a kid, it's a good memory, right? And it's a comfort memory. It reminds you of holidays. It reminds you of birthday parties. And people tend to gravitate to things that, made them feel happy as a child. And you're trying to do that with food, but we overdo it as adults. So that's kind of the 4 reasons why mainly I see this come up. And people are sort of trying to understand, well, why am I doing this? A lot of the time you can fall into all of these categories or even just one. So
I know, as women, so much, we're told that you're strong if you hide your emotions, right? Oh, you're so strong. And I think that's something that we really have to, get over or find that showing emotion is normal and we all have emotions. But, as moms specifically, sometimes you just try to push them down and get through your day. We're so busy with everything. And so sometimes that food is a way of trying to push those feelings down and those emotions down. And so, yes, so I agree with all of those that you were just mentioning. Now, I would love to talk about how to prevent this, this emotional eating episode. And also, when you find yourself in an emotional eating episode and you're halfway through and maybe eating an entire thing of ice cream, an entire gallon of ice cream or pint of ice cream, and you're like, well, I'm not hungry. I'm doing this because of my emotions, what to do. So let's start with the prevention aspect. How do you prevent this?
So the first thing that comes to mind when I think about preventing it, there's usually little clues before you start. It can be a physical thing. It could be something as simple as you're standing in the food aisle and you're doing something weird, like you're rubbing your fingers or something, or you're clenching your teeth a little bit. And it's almost like you have this just like gnawing feeling that you want to do something to get rid of this feeling, whatever it is. So that is a really small symptom for people to pick up on. The next thing is people don't usually notice, I've noticed, until after. And then that's when the guilt, the shame, all that comes in. So it's trying to check in before it happens. And the reason is sort of, there's a difference. Like when you crave something, it's instant. When you're hungry, it's like, okay, it builds. So when you're like, I'm really craving this, I really want it right now, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, why? Like, what is it that I'm feeling right now that I really want to have this? Like, is it because I'm hungry and I haven't eaten properly throughout the day and my blood sugars are all off? That could be one aspect, and that's more of a physical thing. Mostly it comes from, it's usually late at night because that's when people are sort of less busy, right? We're not running around anymore. And you're kind of starting to let the wheels kind of turn a bit with the emotions in your head, and you're starting to think like, okay, this problem that I'm going through right now, or I'm dealing with this and this stress, it starts to sort of creep in. And that's where you sort of have to check in, like, what's going on for me? Like, do I feel anxious? Do I feel depressed? Am I needing, to talk to somebody? Am I needing a hug? And there's different things that we can figure out like beforehand. A lot of people very much, like I said, aren't in tune with that yet. There's a couple of things, like practical things we can do I can talk about, but this is kind of like first checking in with your emotions and figuring out like, what is it that I'm actually feeling? Like, am I actually feeling like upset, angry? Do I need to talk to somebody? Do I just need to relax? Like sometimes it's a boredom thing. Sometimes it's trying to get rid of emotions. Sometimes it's just like, I don't feel happy and I'm trying to make myself happy. So those are kind of the emotional side of things. Now, what usually happens is people get to the point where they're like, okay, I've eaten like you said, a tub of ice cream. What I usually talk to people first about is ask yourself, check in, like, how are you feeling? When you start eating it and you realize, okay, I'm eating like over what I probably should be, I would say before that, you would actually just portion out a little bit for yourself. A lot of the all or nothing people, though, unfortunately, you can't keep a lot of that food in the house in general because you can't leave it alone. And it's not your fault. It's that if you have a big giant bag of chips or a big, tub of ice cream, like once you get that flavor in your mouth, you're like, I want more. It's making me happy. I want to eat the rest of it. I suggest those people typically who are like that, buy one small thing. Like if you want to go for an ice cream, go for an actual like cone of ice cream and you can't go out anymore. Or get like an individual bag of chips if that's something that you want to eat. If you start buying like the Costco sizes of things, you're going to get yourself into big trouble because now you're having to resist temptation of something physically you can be addicted to: sugar, salt, unhealthy fats, and all that. Now, usually prevention is key for these episodes. A lot of the time people kind of get to the end of the episode and then they're like, oh shoot, now I feel really bad. I feel guilty. I feel angry at myself. I feel shameful. And this is what creates the binge cycle, because then those bad feelings make you purge or starve yourself the next day or reduce your calories and be really hard on yourself. So it's back to like limiting. So it keeps going around in a circle. So the thing is, you got to step out of that circle. Unfortunately, you got to actually look at it and be like, I've been doing this for a while. I keep telling myself like I'm starting Monday. What is going on? I'm stuck in something here. So it's like stepping outside of it. The first thing I usually suggest to people is accountability. So that's number one, is accountability to your emotions, like I've talked about before, because you really need to check in deeply what you're feeling and what you're trying to avoid. A lot of it is people try to avoid things, and usually you need somebody to help you uncover what it is. So this is where, we go backwards, sort of like where you are right now. What have you been experiencing the past few weeks for stress? What have you been experiencing the past few months, few years? We keep going backwards and figuring out what it is. Sometimes it could be from when you're little. Sometimes it could be like recent stuff. It just depends. The next thing I usually talk to people about is understanding your mindset and your tapes. So a lot of people get into trouble and they don't realize it, but tapes are something that play automatically in our head, and we don't challenge them because we've grown up with them and we think they're normal. We think they're, an example, even just for, food wise, sometimes people don't feel like they have an abundance of food and it's scarce. And as soon as they have food, they've got to eat it because they don't feel like they're going to have any more of it, right? That's usually a money thing. Not having enough, in your life. You've grown up with very little food around you, or you've got lots of siblings that fight over food and you kind of get like the scraps if you don't get in there, right? So there's various different things that it can come from. The other one, I would say the third one, is looking at the environment that you're in and the people around you and how are they kind of eating? What are their emotions? Are you kind of, because the problem is it's like the 5 people that you're around, right? It's what are their tapes? What are they sort of saying to you? How are they kind of being, how do they deal with stress? Are you doing it together because you're trying to bond, right? And you don't even know sometimes that you're doing it. That's why like people, couples, they typically either work out together or, they usually eat a lot of food together. Like you kind of, or there's
or
like
both.
a lot of, or both, right? So there's, you're trying to sort of unconsciously fit in a little bit on that aspect. And then lastly, we sort of look at the physical aspect. And this is where people think like, oh, is something wrong with me? Like I just can't lose weight. And this is where usually this is the last one I look at, but this is how, like, are you moving your body? Are you doing other things to cope? How do you feel about your own body? That's another one. And that's the confidence thing that you're talking about as well, right? And what types of foods and drinks are you typically eating and bringing into the house? Because people are like habitual, and we typically buy the same food over and over again because it's what we know and it's comfort. And I usually try to challenge people to buy something a little bit different, or if there's snacks coming into the house for the kids, the partner, try and buy the ones that you don't like for them, so that way it's not more temptation. Because again, that's where I said, like, there's a bit of, you're trying to resist temptation on that aspect too. So I would say those are the 4 things that can sort of help prevent them from happening. A lot of them, like I said, the first 3 is basically all around emotion.
That was incredible advice. That's a lot of information, but a lot of it is so true. And a lot of the things that you said actually just brought up memories of when I had my eating disorder. And it's funny because, I mean, it's not funny, but, emotional eating is so, eating disorders are triggered by a lot of things, but emotions are one of them. And diet, the diet industry and everything that you were just talking about, and that whole cycle of binging and emotional eating and binging and purging and all of this stuff. And that was something that I went through, and that was something that I had to figure out myself. So everything that you were just discussing has been my own personal journey. So it's very interesting to hear, other people talk about it, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, yep, check, yep, check, yep, check. But it's very interesting. And one of the things that you mentioned as well was, and I chuckled a little bit, and it's really not that funny, but my husband is one of 3 boys, and he's the youngest.
Right.
So he really struggled with that, I'm not gonna get enough food, because I'm the youngest boy, so I'm gonna eat as much as I can, and I'm gonna eat as quick as I can, right? And he used to joke about it. But when I was going through my eating disorder, I was like, we really, could you try to slow down a little bit? It makes me anxious when I'm sitting there and I'm watching you like shoveling all this food because you think you're not going to eat enough, And he was like, he never even realized it. I mean, he doesn't have any issue with food, at all, but he just never realized it until I brought it to his attention. He was like, oh, I never, I was the youngest of 3 boys. I just always thought like I had to get what I can, at that moment. Yeah. So I chuckled when you said that, because that was my husband to a T until I addressed it. And I was like, it does make me feel very anxious when you eat that quickly. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. So
that's interesting. Yeah, for him, it sounds like it's more of a survival thing. Yes. So if I don't get like I said, if I don't get what I need, and that can be due to like a lot of kids in the family, especially boys. My goodness, I got 2 boys myself. They eat so much. I need to buy another freezer. But or if you grow up, and you don't have a lot of food and you're not used to having like a full fridge. When you have a full fridge, it's like, this isn't going to last long. Like, I need to eat this. Otherwise, like, when's the next, it's that almost like that feeling of like, when's the next paycheck, right? And yes, I can understand, how him eating fast and eating probably bigger amounts and stuff, it makes you anxious, right? So it's kind of fueling you as well at the same time. So, it's both sort of checking in and slowing down and really feeling and enjoying the food. That's what I try to tell people as well, is really people who eat fast. Yes, it's very much like sit and look at your food and sort of think about like how it grew or whatever, where it came from, and really enjoy and taste the food and put your fork down in between, because people who eat really fast, they actually don't recognize how much they're eating. And it typically leads to being overweight, unfortunately, because you're putting so much food into your system, your brain doesn't connect it for about 20 minutes. So if you've eaten like an entire dinner in 10 minutes, your brain's like, I'm not full, still eat, continue. So you're eating more and you're not actually telling your body you're satisfied. So that's why it's really good to eat also really slow and steady, and not also eat, like, I know this is a big one for a lot of people, on the run. Like, I know as a mom, it's being bad for that too, right? Like you're sitting and you're trying to eat something while you're dealing with your kids or you're running errands or something like that. And again, if you're doing things like that, I try and suggest to people do more of like a protein shake, something that's like a liquid that has a bit of protein or like fruits or veggies in it, versus like trying to eat like a meal, because it's also going to cause a lot of like digestive issues as well for you.
I know I had to take off my coaching hat when I was talking to him, because I'm very much so like, and that's what I teach my clients as well, is, slow down, enjoy your meal. And also for on that note as well, a lot of, going for seconds as well. And I always say, take a few minutes just to like, breathe, take a few breaths in between. If you check in with yourself, if you're really hungry, go get seconds. But if not, it's okay to stop. So yeah. I know that's always a question as well. Well, can I eat seconds? Yes, of course you can eat seconds if you're hungry, but take a few minutes to collect your thoughts and take a deep breath and check in with yourself and notice if you really are truly hungry. So a big
one I noticed in the diet industry was the Clean Plate Club.
Exactly.
So that's massive for people, and that's guilt and shame from being a child and being told, there's starving kids in Africa and all that stuff, and if you don't eat your food, like everyone else is gonna suffer. And a lot of people do that. Like I've noticed a lot of adults eat because they're like, well, I don't want to waste. I don't want to, and that's a little bit more like, let's talk about portion sizes and don't take more than you think. And you can always put food back. Like, I suggest that to my parents too, is that with the kids, if they don't always eat the dinner at the table, try not to force them, but like wrap up, if it's more than half or half left, usually wrap it up and save it for another meal, because the worst thing you can do is get your kids to sit there and force them to finish, because then they're going to start having all these tapes and guilt going into adulthood that they have to clean their plate, or they're insulting somebody else, or somebody else is starving somebody somewhere else, right? That's another big one.
And I think that a lot of women, a lot of people in general in our generation are like that, because our parents, at least my parents definitely did. They didn't think anything of it. They didn't know any repercussions of that, nothing against them. But I think we're so fortunate that we do know the repercussions now, and that we can instill that in our kids, for the next generation. So we're very lucky that in that aspect. Now, I do want to talk about, before we wrap up, just that, that guilt piece of it. And I know that's something that's huge, especially for people who are chronic dieters, like you said, and that all or nothing mentality. When somebody does find themselves in the situation of, okay, maybe, I was really upset, say this is the situation, I'm really upset, sad, whatever, I eat a whole pint of ice cream and I'm feeling extremely guilty. What do you do from there? Instead of, because that can quickly lead to the whole cycle, right?
Right. The thing there is that a lot of people are still on autopilot and they're doing what they know. So the guilt and the shame, it is a way to harm oneself by restricting, by purging, all that kind of stuff. And, sometimes it might take a few times to walk away and cry, because it's an emotional, like, you're trying to hurt yourself in that aspect. And you're really sabotaging, sort of like not being able to get off that cycle. What I do usually suggest is, in those moments, walk away, and, even something as putting a big blanket in the dryer and wrapping it around yourself, and it's like a comfort thing, or have a warm bath with some Epsom salts, or go and talk to somebody that won't be judgmental about it. And I think that's where coaching really helps. And a place to actually feel like if I say how I feel, I'm not going to be judged or ridiculed or, told that like, my emotions, like that's so silly or whatever, right? Like you want to actually be heard and valid for what's going on. And again, those are emotions, right, that are going to come up for people. Because physically your body is telling you like, my stomach hurts, like I feel sick. I don't feel good, like stop what you're doing. But it's your emotions that keep telling you to go the opposite way, right? So I think in those moments, trying to do something that comforts you, because in those moments where guilt and shame come in, you're going to probably try your best to say bad things to yourself, to make yourself feel worse. And that leads down a whole nother path. And those are the moments where you really, really need to be kind to yourself. Because like I said, if you don't, you're going to go down a completely different path, and it just reinforces the cycle over and over again. So that's where like I definitely work one-on-one with my moms, because for a lot of people, it is a very emotional, personal area that people need to break through. And I think the first thing is awareness for sure, what's going on.
Great advice. Now, just to wrap things up, I'm curious. You had so many incredible pieces of advice today, but what would your number one piece of advice be for a mom that really struggles with emotional eating?
The one that keeps coming up in my head is accountability, because it's easier said than done to walk away, to not hear those tapes over and over again. If you have somebody that's there that's not judgmental, who can lend an ear, who understands what you're going through, and can help you sort of work through those emotional walls, incredible things happen. Everything changes in your life in a good way.
I completely agree. And I think many times when people are going through, emotional eating or anything in their life, especially as moms, we feel alone. You feel alone, and you feel like you can't talk to anybody about it. And, coming from somebody who did have an eating disorder, you feel so alone. And once you talk to somebody about it, again, whether it be a coach like you or I, or if you talk to a therapist, or if you talk to, somebody, a friend who understands, who may have been going through the same things that you have, it truly, the second you start to talk, it makes you feel more free, and you feel so much better. And I can honestly say that I remember the second I told the first person about my eating disorder, and I was just like, I'm healed. I'm so much better. I wasn't, but the second you get it off your chest, you're just like, wow, like incredible things happen. So having an accountability partner, having a coach, having somebody to...
Right. The reason I say accountability is because isolation is the prison. And as we all know, with this whole crazy pandemic thing going on, we've all been physically isolated in different ways. But there's a lot of people out there that are isolated, and they're trapped in their own thoughts. They're trapped in their own mindset. And like you said, it's so freeing once you talk to somebody about it. For sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Bethany. I'm so excited to share this with my audience. If my audience would like to follow you, where can they find you?
If the audience want to come and check me out, they can go to my website, which is www.ndelish.com, and I can leave that with you there as well.
I'll put that in my show notes. And social media, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, correct?
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I've got a podcast as well myself on Anchor. Got a couple of different things going on. So I do actually spend probably most of my time on Facebook, within groups with moms and stuff like that as well. All of that is on my website, so you can follow me there.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to put the link there. And then you also do offer a free 15-minute discovery call, right? And can they find that on your website as well?
Yes, they should be able to go onto the website, and there actually is a place where it says ready to join. And then you can actually go and book a free 15-minute consultation. I do offer that for people that actually just want to have a sit and chat with me. Like, I don't know if there's anything going on, but can you sort of help me out here? So that's kind of a good way to build that relationship with that person as well.
Thank you again, Bethany, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.